You learned early that silence could protect you, that being unseen was safer than being misunderstood. But what happens to a mind that builds its worth on invisibility, that mistakes neglect for peace and absence for love? You grew in the shadows of voices that never called your name, learning to disappear so completely that even you stopped looking. Yet the world still turns toward noise, doesn't it? And when no one looks back at you, what part of you begins to dissolve first? Neglect doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in the absence of attention. When a child is ignored, the brain rewires itself to interpret silence as safety. Cortisol levels remain heightened, teaching the nervous system to anticipate rejection before it arrives. You start scanning every room for micro signs of being noticed, a flicker of acknowledgement, a brief nod, and when they never come, your mind folds inward. You learn to disappear in plain sight, to exist without demanding proof. Over time, this becomes your personality: quiet, compliant, invisible. Yet deep down, a question hums like static beneath your calm exterior. If no one ever sees you, how do you know you're real? Children don't choose silence. They are trained into it. When every attempt to speak is met with dismissal, the brain learns that expression equals danger. Over time, language itself becomes foreign. Words lose their shape. Thoughts lose their urgency. You start editing yourself mid-sentence, then mid-thought, until only quiet remains. Psychologists call it learned helplessness, but that term is too clean for the ache it hides. You convince yourself that you prefer solitude, that peace means not being heard. But peace built on avoidance isn't peace, it's paralysis. And each year, the muscles of your voice atrophy a little more. Tell me, when silence becomes your identity, how do you ever find your way back to sound? A child learns who they are through reflection, the mirroring gaze of a caregiver that says, "You exist, and I see you." When that gaze never comes, the self becomes abstract, a blur of unfinished thoughts and half-formed emotions. You start performing normalcy, imitating the gestures of the scene. You smile when others smile, nod when they nod, but it's all mimicry, a desperate attempt to feel coherent. Psychologists call this attachment void, the absence of emotional mirroring that fractures identity formation. You grow up chasing reflections in others, begging their eyes to confirm what yours cannot. But when every mirror stays blank, how do you know where your face ends and your emptiness begins? Neglect doesn't only silence the mind, it erases the body. When affection is absent, physical awareness dulls. Hunger, fatigue, even pain blur together into one low hum of neglect. You start floating through your own life like a ghost inhabiting skin that never quite fits. Somatic psychology calls this disembodiment, a defense mechanism where the nervous system numbs sensation to survive rejection. You mistake dissociation for calm. You call numbness maturity. You praise yourself for not needing anyone. But the body remembers what the mind denies: every unfelt touch, every unspoken word. And when your body finally demands to be acknowledged, will you recognize it as your own, or as another stranger asking to be seen? When love is unpredictable, attention becomes currency. You learn to read every breath, every pause, every flicker of tone, hyper-attuned to danger that never arrives, but always might. This is hypervigilance, the body's attempt to predict rejection before it happens. It's survival through anticipation. You become the quiet observer in every room, mapping people's moods, studying their smallest movements, desperate to avoid being the reason they withdraw. You call it empathy, but it's fear dressed as intuition. The nervous system never rests. The body stays coiled, waiting for a sound that never comes. And when calm finally appears, it feels unbearable, like waiting for a punishment that's late. Tell me, what happens when you can't tell the difference between safety and silence? To survive invisibility, You build a version of yourself that others can tolerate. Winnicott called it the false self, a psychological armor shaped to please, to fit, to never disrupt. You become adaptable, agreeable, endlessly understanding. You mirror the needs of others because no one ever mirrored yours. People praise your calmness, your maturity, your self-control, unaware that every compliment reinforces the mask. Over time, you forget what authenticity feels like. The false self becomes not a performance, but a prison. You smile through the ache, speak with precision, apologize for existing. And yet, in the quiet after social performance, the truth presses against the inside of your ribs. If you've only ever been what others needed, then who have you ever been? Neglect teaches you that affection must be earned, never given freely. Every achievement becomes a plea, every act of kindness a transaction. You overperform in school, in relationships, in life, chasing validation that always slips through your fingers. Psychologists call it conditional self-worth, a belief that value exists only when proven. You become addicted to effort, terrified of rest, because rest feels like invisibility. Even success tastes hollow. No amount of accomplishment can fill the absence where love should have been automatic. You keep working, keep pleasing, keep proving, hoping someone will finally say, "You can stop now." But what if no one ever does? And worse, what if you no longer know how to stop yourself? When emotions go unacknowledged long enough, the psyche learns to freeze them mid-breath. This is emotional numbing, a trauma response masquerading as composure. You become the calm one, the rational one, the one who doesn't cry. But inside, your emotions rot in stillness, trapped behind the glass of repression. Psychologists describe it as alexithymia, the inability to name or identify your feelings. You can describe events, but not experiences. You understand pain intellectually, not emotionally. People call you strong, unaware that you are simply paralyzed. The heart still beats, but faintly, as if unsure it deserves rhythm. Tell me, when you've silenced your feelings for survival, how do you ever remember what it means to feel alive? Neglect doesn't disappear with age, it mutates. The ignored child grows into an adult with a hunger too complex to name. You seek what you were denied through others: intimacy, validation, understanding. Yet when someone offers it, you recoil. Your body reads care as danger, love as exposure. It's called repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate familiar pain, hoping this time it will end differently. But it never does. You chase emotionally distant people because their silence feels like home. You confuse inconsistency with chemistry. And each time you are left unseen again, something inside you whispers, of course. So tell me, when the ache itself feels like belonging, would healing even feel like you anymore? Ignored children internalize absence as fault. Psychologists call this internalized blame, the belief that if love is withheld, it must be because you are unworthy. You dissect every action, every word, searching for the hidden sin that explains neglect. Your mind becomes a courtroom where you are both prosecutor and defendant. Even as an adult, you apologize for existing, for taking up space, for wanting attention. Guilt feels safer than anger, because anger risks being wrong, and wrongness confirms invisibility. You carry the weight of absence on your shoulders, mistaking it for character. And in the mirror, do you ever see yourself? Or only the shadow of a child you convinced yourself deserved nothing? Neglect leaves a residue, a strange comfort in invisibility. Some adults unconsciously seek relationships that replicate the patterns of childhood: dismissive partners, inattentive friends, workplaces where effort goes unnoticed. Psychologists call this trauma repetition, the compulsion to recreate familiar pain, because familiarity masquerades as safety. You feel relief when overlooked. Attention triggers anxiety. Praise is suspect. Affection feels intrusive. The world outside your mind may shine, but inside, your nervous system prefers shadow. You are addicted to the absence that once defined survival. And when you crave being invisible more than being loved, have you become the architect of your own neglect? Repeated neglect corrodes the ability to trust, not only others, but yourself. Attachment theory shows that inconsistent care fractures the expectation that needs will be met, leaving a mind perpetually scanning for betrayal. You anticipate disappointment in every promise, every gesture, every smile. Even when someone offers genuine care, your nervous system interprets it as a trap. Relationships become exercises in suspicion, every connection a test you know you will fail. Over time, you begin to distrust your own instincts, questioning whether your desires are valid or dangerous. And if you cannot trust yourself, how could you ever trust another to see you, or to keep you, without vanishing? Neglect leaves more than scars. It leaves echoes that shape perception. Childhood memories become fragmented, a patchwork of absence and longing. Neuroscience calls this implicit memory, recollections stored not in words, but in body and emotion, surfacing as anxiety, depression, or inexplicable dread. You can recall the facts of your childhood, but the feeling remains nameless, untouchable. Every corner, every tone, every fleeting shadow can trigger the ghost of being unseen. The past does not stay behind. It infiltrates every thought, every relationship, every choice. And when your own history continues to haunt your present, how do you know what is truly happening now, and what is merely the replay of absence? The ignored child grows into an adult who fears intimacy, yet craves it. Social bonds are riddled with hesitation, because the pattern of absence has taught that closeness equals pain. You analyze every word, every glance, every silence, attempting to predict rejection before it arrives. Psychologists call this interpersonal hypervigilance, a survival mechanism that ensures you never fully let anyone in. But the more you shield yourself, the more isolated you become. Even when others extend warmth, your mind hesitates at the edge, questioning its authenticity. And if every connection is a potential threat, what becomes of a life spent half present, longing for the very attention you have trained yourself to fear? You have lived your life on the margins of attention, learning to survive in absence, to hide in plain sight, to believe that invisibility is safety. Every emotion, every desire, every memory has been filtered through the lens of neglect, leaving a self that is fragmented, cautious, and endlessly searching. The ignored child never truly leaves. They dwell in your nervous system, in your silence, in the muscles that refuse to trust. Healing is a word, a concept, a distant echo. But what if the real truth is that the world never intended to see you, and you have spent a lifetime preparing to vanish anyway? And in that preparation, when no eyes are watching, what remains of you at all?